All right, can everyone see?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. All right, so let me back to the start. So welcome to the National Day of Civic Hacking Data at Work Workforce Data and Initiative webinar. We're going to go over the Data at Work challenge and what the team is trying to accomplish. We're going to do quick introductions and then go over the challenge and the Open Skills API. So to get started, we're going to turn it over to the team at DataAtWork.
Okay, well, hey everybody, I'll kick things off if we want to move to the next slide. And so my name is Lori Foster, and I am an industrial organizational psychologist from the White House Social and Behavioral Sciences team, otherwise known as SBST. And I'm the SBST representative on the Workforce Data Initiative. And one of the things that I guess I wanted to frame today's discussion by noting that workforce data is really the connective tissue that links labor market supply and demand. So it is the mechanism through which job seekers are connected to employers. And so broadly speaking, the challenge that we're trying to address is the lack of a common language. So if job seekers are using one set of terms to describe their skills and what they have to offer, and if employers are using a different set of terms to describe the same skills, then it makes it very difficult to connect up the talent that's needed on the labor market side with what exists. Broadly speaking, that's what we aim to address. Now, what I've shown here is a screenshot of SBST's website because I wanted to draw attention to the tagline there. It says, "We believe that government works best when it's built for people." And that philosophy is really taken to heart with this workforce data initiative. In other words, when we set out to solve this challenge and this problem, we want to make sure that the solutions are built for people. The real challenges that people encounter in their everyday life, whether they're a small business or a large employer or a policymaker or a job seeker of various sorts. And that means truly understanding the day-to-day workforce challenges that are encountered and the way that folks actually think about the challenges that they face and the way that they actually make decisions when it comes to finding jobs and finding employees. For that reason, user research has played a central role in this workforce data initiative. And co-leading the user research piece of this initiative with me is Rachel Book, who's here with us today as well. So I wanted to turn the baton over to Rachel to talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you so much, Lori. So hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Book. In my day job, I lead diversity recruiting strategies for a major financial services firm. I've been advising and co-leading the user research portion of this project with Lori and the team. It's been fun, and we've been doing some great work. So it all got started when lots of smart people from government agencies and private industry got together, we identified this challenge, and we knew that the way to solve this was through opening data sets and encouraging innovation through technology. But as Lori mentioned, we wanted to make sure that what we were building would be useful to real people, so real job seekers and employers, and that we were building on and not duplicating existing tools and resources. So we have lots of really interesting conversations with various users representing the supply and demand side of the talent ecosystem. For my almost 20 years in recruiting, mostly in the technology space, I've seen, especially as we look to fill roles that are high demand, that we could benefit from more granularity in data, from a geography point of view, from skills, and then also in terms of understanding what the talent marketplace looks like. And in order to get that data, we need to make sure that we collaborate to make sure that this information is integrated into the technology tools that we all use on a day-to-day basis. Especially now, as more employers are competing for talent in very in-demand roles, and especially as more companies look to diversify their workforce and they look to talent profiles with non-traditional backgrounds, new and different ways of acquiring skills, it's become really important to understand the different ways and the unique ways that skills and experience might appear on a resume of the ideal candidate. And so the work that we're doing will enable everyone involved in the talent supply and demand ecosystem to consider those complementary skills and the various ways to acquire them, right? For some, it may be a traditional four-year degree. For others, it might be a different type of credential, especially for new and emerging areas of technology that may not have been built out within the existing institutional data models. So later on in our conversation, you'll hear from our technical team about the data that's available, what's missing, what they've been building, and you'll have an opportunity to ask lots of questions. But we wanted to give you a chance to hear from one of the users that we spoke with to understand some of the challenges, the real challenges that are being experienced by job seekers. So we have here to speak with you Eddie Menser, who's the program manager of the Military Spouse Employment Partnership Program. And Eddie serves all of the military spouses throughout the United States and assists with the unique career challenges that they experience due to the frequent relocations that they make as their spouses are reassigned to new duty stations. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Eddie, who will walk you through a day in the life of a military spouse as they search for their first and their next career. And then we'll continue on with the conversation. So Eddie, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rachel. And, it's great to be able to join this conversation today and discuss the challenges that military spouses face. And this is one subset, but I think that a lot of the challenges that our spouses face can be translated over into many different job seekers, as well as the employers that they're seeking jobs from. As we start out, I first want to recognize that I am a military spouse myself, so as well as a talking head from D.C. and the Pentagon, my wife is an active duty service member in the Air Force, so I've experienced a lot of the challenges that military spouses face as well throughout my time as a government employee and as a military spouse. As we look at the slides, the first slide I wanted to show you was really the profile of the military spouse and what does that spouse look like. So our typical military spouses, the key there is that there is not a typical military spouse. Military spouses comprise about 1.1 million individuals. 91% of those are female. So definitely the preponderance is female. I represent the minority in this group. There's no doubt whatsoever. But a lot of folks will look at the military spouse as a young spouse that doesn't have a great deal of background. You can see here from the data that we've provided, we're about, the average age is 30 years plus. So a number of educated spouses. When you look at the education side, 84% of our military spouses have some college background or license or certification in a particular field. That's much higher than the general civilian population. 25% have attained a bachelor's degree, and 10% of the 85% have attained a graduate or higher degree. So we have a very educated workforce. 85%. So of 1.1 million, we're talking roughly 900,000 military spouses indicate that they want or need to work. However, we have a 23% unemployment rate, and that is a huge unemployment rate. We also know that military wives, and we're able to pull this data based on the sample size that we have, knowing that females are the biggest part of our population. 25% earn less than 25% less than their civilian counterparts, which is a huge wage gap. Finally, you look at military life, and Rachel talked about this. Our families relocate 14% more frequently than their civilian counterparts. And 75% of our active military spouses are likely to have children at home. So that's a huge population. So that plays into their needs as well. If we go to the next slide, it really identifies the challenges that our spouses face. So when they are around the military. Obviously, we have military members that are stationed around the world. So you see on there the words CONUS and OCONUS. When a military spouse moves to an overseas location, their opportunities for employment plummet substantially. Even when they're in the States, many of our duty locations are extremely isolated. My wife happens to work for the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and just last week they were up in North Dakota, and they were out visiting and surprising some of our nuclear missile crews in missile silos all across the northern hemisphere. And those folks are located in areas that there are no employment opportunities for their families, for their spouses. We know that service members quite often, in a diminishing strength of our armed services, are faced with very long duty days, and that we still have more than 100,000 service members deployed around the world. So when those individuals are working those long days, when they're deployed to different locations, the military spouse is really the glue that holds the family together. We look at some of the employer-related areas, there definitely is a stigma of employers, especially those at the local level, that look at, why would I invest the effort and the time to train a military spouse knowing that they are going to leave in 2 to 3 years? That's where we come in and working with employers and large organizations, and I can tell you that large organizations understand this. It's the small businesses sometimes that don't. When we look at today's current generation that is entering the workforce, our millennial generation, we know that millennials stay with a company 3 to 4 years, and they look for new opportunities. Sounds a lot like a military spouse. So big corporations are understanding that. They understand also that there are opportunities for portable work, for remote work opportunities. So we see a lot of growth in those opportunities for military spouses. One of the challenges for military spouses, besides career gaps, is being able just to get that time to be able to have a work-life balance, that the employer understands that if somebody has a school appointment or somebody needs to take a child to the doctor's appointment, it generally is going to fall on the military spouse to do that. Our employers, we also want our employers to understand the value that military spouses bring, and we'll talk about that right at the end. A lot of system-related challenges. Licensure portability is a huge one for spouses that are in licensure-oriented fields. Being able to take that license to a state, reciprocity, it presents a huge challenge. If you spend a year trying to get a new license in a particular state, it really is it's a huge challenge. Awareness of our spouses of different programs, and then you look at the family, the child care, the balance of work versus family, and the lack of extended family support. I mean, I can speak to that one. Our extended family is in Oregon and Omaha. They're not going to be able to help me out this weekend when I need to answer a report to Congress, and my wife is traveling someplace with the Air Force. We look at the next slide. This is the program that we have at the DoD, the SECO program, or the Spouse Education and Career Opportunities Program, and this is what we're trying to do, is to provide solutions and resources and tools for our military spouses as they look at their educational and their employment endeavors, knowing that education, whether it's formal education, whether it's licensure, accreditation, certification, that is going to lead to better opportunities in employment. So we look at our military spouses, a very educated field, a group of people across all sectors at all levels. 1.1 million military spouses. That includes a 17-year-old spouse that's going to get married this weekend. Next Monday, they're going to get their dependent ID card, and they are going to have no idea what it is they want to do or can do, and they don't know anything about the programs we have to support. It also is a spouse that's been with us for 37, 38 years. Betty Welsh is the spouse of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, who is retiring in about a week. What does she want to do? She has a huge amount of experience. She's worked at the senior executive level of various corporations. So we are working with a very diverse audience, both in the spectrum of age, in the spectrum of the language that they utilize, and that's where we see this initiative as being hugely impactful. So if we have somebody that started off working in the IT industry 30 years ago that's a military spouse, and we have a 20-year-old that's a military spouse and working in the IT industry, they speak two different languages, and those languages probably don't translate communicate with the employers that are looking for those spouses. So that's why this initiative is extremely important to us. We're really excited. I was asked yesterday by the group, how does a military spouse look for a job? And they look for jobs just like everybody else does. They look online, they use word of mouth, they use networking, they look at the local newspapers. Some places still have local newspapers in print that you can find jobs in, but they do it just like everybody else. Now, we provide some specific resources for them to be able to do that. We have a partnership with more than 300 regional or national and international companies that have made a commitment to hiring military spouses. In 5 years, those companies have hired more than 95,000 military spouses, and we connect those spouses with those partner employers through a web portal where we pull in job feeds from those organizations. Spouses are able to search and look for jobs. They can upload their resumes, apply for jobs. But the challenge comes with, how does that spouse identify their skill sets and their employment desires, and how does the employer do that? So we're really excited to be a part of this. It's going to be great to see what comes out of this work. I know you've got folks across the country that are working on this, and we are really excited to be a piece of it. So thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, Eddie. That was really insightful. Matt, I think you're next.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Lori and Rachel and Eddie, both for that fantastic introduction to the Workforce Data Initiative, as well as really the illustration of one of its most important use cases and user stories. My name is Matt Gee. I'm with Lindsay Knight. I am a Senior Fellow at the Center for Data Science and Public Policy at the University of Chicago, and I'm the technical lead on the Workforce Data Initiative. And Lindsay is the project manager for the project on our side. And it's on me to just go into a bit of a technical deep dive with the whole team and everyone on this call on the resources that we are making available and the ways that we are hoping to engage the brigade community and the broader civic tech community in the Workforce Data Initiative. So the first thing I just want to make sure everyone's aware of is that all the information about the project and about all the associated resources are available at the DataAtWork.org website, as well as on the National Day of Civic Hacking site. There's a detailed description of the DataAtWork challenge that I think the great folks at Code for America have put together. And we're really thrilled to be able to engage you as community members in the challenge that we're trying to meet around the Workforce Data Initiative. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking through that so we can understand why we've developed the data resources that we have and what we're hoping you will be able to do with them now that we've talked a little bit about some of the use cases. So if you can go to the next slide. As Rachel and Lori talked about at the beginning, the real challenge is how do we make data work for the American workforce, and how do we make it work better? Right? And one of the critical components of this is how do we make the information that intermediates these transactions between education and training, and ultimately hiring and job search and job election. And there are some major challenges right now in the workforce data ecosystem that are preventing it working for the American workforce. If you move to the next slide. Much of our open data on workforce is outdated. It's not local, it's at the national level, but doesn't have the necessary local context. And it's siloed and scattered across public and private data resources. So moving on to the next slide. Our goal for the Workforce Data Initiative is to help provide better open data that is real-time, that has local context, and that is integrated, standardized, and open. And one of the first places that we're doing that, moving to the next slide, is in releasing better open data on skills and jobs, and then providing new developer resources and third-party tools to the community to use that, to put that data to productive use. And so, moving to the next slide. In order to make this happen, we put together a really fantastic coalition of folks at the national level. There's a alphabet soup there of acronyms, several fantastic states that are leading out as part of the Workforce Data Initiative, and a fantastic coalition of private and nonprofit partners who are working both to provide the strategic direction as well as directly contribute data to this effort. Moving to the next slide. And so the first part of this, the Workforce Data Initiative that we are releasing, is what we're calling the Open Skills API. This is a new public data resource on what we consider the DNA of every job in America. Moving on to the next slide. And the reason why this is important, as Lori and Rachel was saying at the top, skills are in some ways the lingua franca between someone that's looking for a job and a company that's looking to hire someone. You want ultimately to match someone based on skills. You want to be able to acquire the skills that are going to help you gain the next job or move up within the workforce. And unfortunately, we don't in this country have a lingua franca around skills. And that's preventing the kind of matching market that we want to make happen in the American workforce. Moving to the next slide. Like I said, the missing link is skills. So how do we better develop an updated, locally relevant, and standardized shared language around skills? Well, we do that by creating a new pooled data resource that can be that integrates data from a variety of different sources. Moving on to the next slide. There we go. In order to make public and openly available the DNA of every job in America. So this is our goal. Moving on to the next slide. And the way we're doing this is that we have been working for the last year with a variety of government partners, private data aggregators, as well as industry associations and company-specific data partners to pool their private data into a large private database that is incredibly secure. And then we're running a variety of machine learning and natural language processing algorithms on top of that data in order to aggregate it up and create a new public database on skills and how they relate to jobs that can be constantly updated, that has both temporal and spatial information, and can be released through a RESTful API for third-party developers, government users, as well as industry itself to make use of. Moving on to the next slide. And through the user research that Rachel and Lori talked about at the top of the call, we've really worked to identify a core set of initial API endpoints that we're focusing on. And these fall into a set of helper endpoints, as well as the main data endpoints that return useful data around skills and jobs. And I won't go into too much detail on this, and we'll save it for the Q&A. But there are a variety of auto-completion at endpoints and normalization endpoints, as well as the ability to enter a particular standard job title and receive back a set of critical skills for that job. Or enter a standard job title and receive back a set of related jobs or jobs that are essentially the potentially next step in progression. Similarly, be able to enter a skill or set of skills and say, here are the jobs that are best fit. And lastly, given a set of skills, what are the associated skills that most folks have in a particular context, in a particular industry that you may want to acquire, because they're highly complementary. And for the National Day of Civic Hacking, we've really focused on just the skill endpoints, so 4, 5, and 6, and 9 and 10. And just 10. And so for next weekend, those are the main endpoints that we will be releasing. But over the next 2 months, we'll be releasing the rest of the endpoints the rest of these 10 endpoints successfully. And we will be doing rapid deployment and extensions of the API throughout the summer. So moving on to the next slide. There should be there we go, API documentation. There we go. So because we are moving very, very quickly in the development and deployment of the API. The API itself is very dynamic, and so we are handling all of the versioning of the API and its documentation through Swagger Hub, and the latest version of the API spec will be available through Swagger Hub, as well as on the docs webpage of our DataAtWork site. And so we are, like I said, because we're in active development, both of these are actually going to be updated quite a bit over the next few days. And the stable release version of the API for the National Day of Civic Hacking actually won't be officially available until Monday. We wanted to be sure that everyone had the right pointers and knew where to navigate to. Moving to the next slide. And so while we've been working on this and doing user research, we've also been beginning to work with a variety of developer partners to build out example applications and reference applications on top of this new data source. And two of those are Innovate Educate and Parent. Innovate Educate being a nonprofit that focuses on helping with skills-based hiring, and Parent helping employers do a better placement of talent, especially around non-cognitive skills. And both of them are developing applications on top of our API that help individuals enter their own capabilities and get back both their best fits for jobs and occupations, as well as better understand what skills are most critical for the jobs that they are seeking so that they can acquire new ones. Moving on to the next slide. And so one of the things we want everyone to have in mind in the Brigade community is that this API is under active development. We are working around the clock to both generate the new data and then provide it up in a structured format. And so one of the things we are inviting you into is not just to use it, but to help us improve it. And so some of the endpoints in the API that you will see in the documentation are actually not just GET requests, but POST requests, so that you can help us refine and improve the underlying data. You can help us identify, here are things that are labeled as skills, for example, but actually aren't skills, or the labeling is a little bit off. And so we encourage you to not just think about and work on applications that are citizen-facing, but also potentially applications where citizens are engaging in the improvement of and development of the data resource. Moving on to the next slide. So that's a whirlwind tour of the Skills API, but we wanted to leave the balance of the time for a Q&A. So with that, let's open it up to the rest of the group to surface your questions, and hopefully we'll be able to provide useful answers.
All right.
So I guess generally for anyone on the line from Brigades, given what you've heard, what are some of the ideas that you've had just from this presentation on ways you might be able to use this API during the National Day of Civic Hacking, or potential blockers that you see for you being able to use this new data resource during a project next Saturday? And maybe another way of phrasing that is, a lot of you guys are prolific users of open data and have participated in not just the use, but sometimes the development of new open data resources. And given what we've shared and the process that we're going through, do you have any tips for us about how we can make this resource more accessible, what additional documentation we should provide, potentially what additional API endpoints we should be considering, given some of the use cases that you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or Matt, it seems like we still. I know it was down yesterday. Is the API back up, or when would that be back up?
That's right. So just as a reminder to folks, we are actually pushing a whole bunch of changes today because of some updates to the underlying data as well as reruns of the algorithm. So we're doing internal testing before we make it live. So if you're looking to get started today, you'll actually have to wait for the weekend. Because we're going to be doing some additional testing between now and Monday. But everything will be live. All those links will be live by Monday of next week.
Cool. So if there's no other questions, I think we'll wrap up early. What we'll do is we'll record this video so that it's on Code for America's YouTube page.
Oh, very good question. So in the last slide of the deck, you'll see there is an email list. So there's a Google group. It's called the Open Skills. It's just Open Skills Project. So we invite everyone to join that Google group if you're interested in being part of the discussion. If you want to be a user or just an observer of the project. We would love for all of you to join, or you can email me directly, and we will get back to you at ASAP with whatever questions you have.